Creating social value through culture. This is one of my favorite subjects, and I'd like to speak with you about it through a very surprising area that I had not predicted. Sports. Not only sports, rugby, a sport that I've never actually seen played live professionally. On BBC World Service, they have a program called Sports World, and it's typically a program not about reporting on sports, but reporting on the culture of sports, its players, where it's played, its fan base, everyone, the range of stakeholders, you could say. And so there's a player called Dan Leo, who's a Pacific Islander who has played professional rugby here in the UK, and he set up what this report calls as a cultural diversity program. And if you look it up, it's the Pacific Rugby Players Welfare Association. He has the intent to help Pacific Islanders who play here in Europe, and 99% of them, according to this report, 99% of Pacific Island rugby players who play internationally are here in Europe. Well, he's taking care of them. He wants to handle their welfare in a way that helps mediate culture. In the interview, he says typically many of the issues that we now know are culture shock seem quite trivial. He mentioned paying local taxes and TV licenses. Now, for those of us who come from nations that don't have a TV license and media is a quite private sphere, we wouldn't understand what it means to have a public resource such as media, and let alone paying one through some form of taxes levied or some form of actual payment that you would, as a private citizen, pay to the government. It wouldn't make sense for terrestrial television for us. So it's something as simple as that. And a whole host of things. You can imagine someone coming from the Pacific Rim headed to the Northern Hemisphere would have many issues in adjusting to the climate and also being a sportsman in that climate. So this player has set up this program. He gave an example of one of the typical sort of cultural clashes that he had and he dealt with. He says, of course, that there are many of his players who come here and they're interdependent in their families. You know, they don't have the individualist particular cultural view of themselves, but they are collectivists. And so they are very much interconnected with their families back home. And he says that some of their players may end up sending 50 to 75% of their salaries back to support those back home, supporting a household, a family, or even a village, they may say. And this puts a particular kind of strain on people, not only in terms of their money, but in terms of their time. And so he was saying that there are instances when players would need to go home for some emergency, but they wouldn't have the personal power to approach their manager or the club owner about that need. So they just disappear. A few weeks later, their contract would be ripped up, and there would be a miscommunication that would end up in a very serious conflict, lack of employment, and someone you've invested a lot in gaining and coming to this region. And so then there's even the aggression and disappointment behind that has the impact of impacting other players that come from that region. He also mentioned something that I found very cute and funny because this happened to me personally. He said one of his players from the region, Samoa, Tonga, Fiji region, had come here, and his team's club had given him a nickname. It was a shortened version of his own name, but he felt that it was so disrespectful that after 6 months, he was ready to just leave and walk off. So through this organization, the Pacific Rugby Players Welfare Association, he was able to engage with the young player. And he, simple as explained to the man that a nickname in this part of the world was a term of endearment. And it was one of the ways that the players actually expressed love for him, as he said. Now, a few months later, of course, the guy loves playing on the team. He's one of the best players on the team. And it all worked out. But it's when we start to think about the work of culture, and it really does surface in every sphere, in every industry of our lives, because culture matters. And I just wanted to bring forth that example because it was so very interesting to me.